If you've ever taken a class from me, either through Infinite Skills or maybe when I'm out on the road somewhere on the planet, you know one thing about me and programs, and that's preferences and how much I like them. Preferences to me customize the program to your workflow. They can make you more efficient. They can make the program, based on your hardware, actually go faster. There's a lot of things that preferences do. Now, to me, preferences are not just set them and forget them. There are some preferences that actually you will change based on what you're doing. Let's do this. I am in Adobe Illustrator. Go up to the word File and go to New. Let's go into Profile. We'll talk more about this stuff later. But we'll go into Profile and go into, say, Web. I'm going to Size, just to open up a new document. It really doesn't matter. Click OK. Incidentally, when you are working in Preferences, you don't have to have anything open anyway. I just want to show you a couple of things as an example of how some of these preferences work. So what I'm going to do is pick up over here my rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw, surprisingly enough, a rectangle. Let me come over here and let me give that a color so we can see it just a little bit better. Let me collapse that back out. Again, we'll talk more about this stuff later. And, well, I can draw rectangles or squares all day long. I don't think this is anything surprising to anybody. Let me come over here and change to the rounded rectangle, and again, do one or two more. Isn't this exciting? Bored yet? Okay. Once I have objects drawn in Adobe Illustrator, I can go to my Move tool right here, and I can, well, select them and move them. Drag it around all day long. But, I think you know this, you can use your arrow keys. Now, if I use my arrow keys by default, I'm moving 1 pixel at a time. Up, down, left, or right. If I want to go faster, I can use the Shift key and go 10 times faster using the arrow keys. Again, most of you probably know that. There's not an Adobe product that doesn't do that. So it's kind of nice to know. Now let's get into preferences, since we got a couple of things on the screen that we've, well, played around with. If you're working in Windows, go to the word Edit. If you're on a Mac, go to Illustrator and go to Preferences, General Preferences. The default, which I like, is Control-K, and that's Control-K in Windows and Command-K on a Mac. Look at these three right here. Keyboard increment, constrain angle, and corner radius. Now, how many have ever gone in and used the arrow keys to move an object in Adobe Illustrator, but that 1 pixel is too much? You go right arrow one time and it's too far to the right. You go left, it's too far to the left. 1 pixel is actually too much. This is what I do. I come in here and type in a period right in front of the 1, and that makes my keyboard increment, when I move it with the arrow keys, 1/10 of a pixel. If I hold the Shift key down, then I'm going 1 pixel at a time. That's what I do. Down here is constrain angle. I'm going to show you this one by putting in, say, 20%. Now, we'll leave the corner radius alone. But when I drew the rounded rectangle, it was using 12 points. You can change that as a default if you want to. Let me click OK. Now, you will notice if I pick up one of these pieces and begin moving it with my arrow keys, you can notice it's moving. Now, it's moving it 1/10 of a pixel at a time, but notice very carefully how it's moving it. It's moving it at a 20-degree angle. Not left and right. That's constrain angle. Watch when I draw again. It's cool. You say, why would I want to do that? There are a lot of reasons why you might want to do this. What if I'm creating a brick wall in a herringbone pattern and I need an angle? Or I need whatever I'm doing in terms of logos or whatever, I need angles. Why not, instead of trying to figure out what the 20-degree is or changing it through the rotate tool, why not go into preferences and change it there? When you're done, change it back. So you can control minutely the precision of the tools with your keyboard increment, and you can choose the constrain angle, and you can choose the defaults on things like the rounded rectangle if you want to. That, to me, is control. Now let's go back. I'm going to press Control-K, Command-K on a Mac. That's the shortcut. I'm going to take constrain back to 0. And since we want to work with defaults during these lessons, I'm going to take that back to just 1. I usually do without even thinking. My default is 0.1 on that. Now, we won't go through all of the preferences now because some of them won't really make as much sense to you until we're actually working on something. I mean, you've got things like tooltips right here. Precise cursors. Some of the tools you have, like your magic wand tool, when you use it, looks like when you're using it a magic wand. Well, let me show you that too. Let me get out here for a second, click OK. Pick up the magic wand tool. And well, it looks like a magic wand. If I go back into, and I'll use the shortcut, Preferences and turn on Precise Cursors and click OK again, I get a precise cursor. Now let me turn that back off again and show you something else here. Let me turn that off. Sometimes I want a precise cursor and sometimes I don't. What I do is, instead of changing the preference, is simply press the cap lock key. When you do, just like in Photoshop, just like in InDesign, it will change all your tools to precision temporarily, and if you press cap lock again, it will take them back again. So that's a nice preference. But if you want to do it on and off, it's best to use the cap lock key. The only place the cap lock key won't work, and this is obvious, is if you're working with the type tool. Cap lock will be cap locks for capitals. Let's go back into our preferences. Okay, what's left in here? Let me show you this one right here. Scale, strokes, and effects. Now it's off right now. So if we get back out of here for a second, this item, let me actually do this. Let me give that a little bit. Well, let me do this first. Control A, and that's Command A on a Mac, Control A in Windows, and delete everything. Okay. Then I'm going to come over here and pick up my rectangle tool again and draw a rectangle. Let me give that a little bit of a lighter color so we can see it does indeed have a stroke. It's right there. It's very thin, but it has a stroke. If I come over here and pick up my Move tool and begin changing it, well, the stroke stays the same. It doesn't get any bigger. If there were effects on it, they would stay the same. They don't get bigger or smaller. But if I go back in, shortcut-wise, Preferences, and turn this one on. Now, by default, it isn't on. I come back to OK, take that same box, and make it bigger. Watch what happens. The stroke or the effects are scaled with it. Now, most of the time, I typically don't like that on because I want that stroke to be defined as what it was. But there are times when I'm resizing something that I do want everything to kind of change with the resize, and I go back and I change that one. Let me go ahead and Control or Command K and get back in, and let's, well, for now, we'll turn that one back off again. Now, over here, we're going to skip some things, but let me show you this. Welcome to the world of the cloud. CC stands for Creative Cloud, Illustrator Creative Cloud. One of the things I like about it is the ability to sync multiple systems. I use Illustrator on this system. It's a Mac. I've got a Windows system, and I have a laptop that's a Mac. All three have Illustrator. When I change preferences, presets, whatever I want here, and I sync, it will sync to all of my devices. It's pretty neat, actually, when you think about it, and you can turn on or off what you want it to sync. Now, like I said, we'll skip some stuff here. Let's go down to units. Now, the default is pixels. I don't use pixels unless I'm working on the internet. I use pica for almost everything, and I use centimeters for everything else. Pica is really good for output to print. It's a universal measuring system. It's not North American. It's not European. Centimeters and inches are obviously like the United States as opposed to everybody else. Whatever you're comfortable with is fine. But if you would like to change it permanently for new documents that you open, then you would change it here. Now, you have another option down here I'll mention quick, and that is identify objects by the name or their XML ID. Objects like SVGs can have XML IDs, and that ID is a name. As a designer, programmer, I give the object so I can control it in something like ActionScript. If you want to, you can identify it by its XML. Most cases, you're probably going to leave that at object name. Let's go down to plugins and scratch disks. Photoshop has something like, well, it has as many scratch disks as you want to use. Illustrator has one additional right here, but what does that do? Well, when you click, it will list any hard drives that you have. If you assign a secondary hard drive, you're dividing the load of working on images between the two hard drives, and your system will run faster. Okay, it is just really a time-saving thing. But if you've got very slow hard drives, it could actually slow you down. So you want Ultra USBs, you want like FireWire 800s, whatever. If you've got one like that, use it. Don't use network drives, they're too slow. But it can actually speed things up for you, and it will give you one. Let's look at one more. User interface. Now this, to me, and this came out in the previous version, begins to take the kind of like the emphasis off of the interface and more on what you're working on by changing, darkening, or lightening it to the way you want it to be. So if I come up here, it says medium dark, I can go into light. It's kind of like the old Illustrator, isn't it? We can go way, 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 way dark if you want to, or you can control it right here just by moving the slider. Now I'm going to take that back to medium dark, which is the default. In addition to the interface, you can tell it to collapse the panels when they're open, when another one is open, or open documents as tabs. The tabs are up here. I like that, so I leave that one on. Preferences, in my opinion, are designed for two very important things. To make the program yours, to personalize it to what you want to do, and to make it run faster for you. But remember, you don't just set a lot of these and forget them. And we will talk about most of the others as we get into some subjects where they make sense. Let's get out of here. And let's move on.